Hi guys and welcome to my latest video. Now what we have here today is Loxjie D30, and I suppose most of you are not familiar with Loxjie brand, and I personally also have little experience, but I did try Loxjie D10, which is a little bit older and cheaper model. At that moment I was really surprised by what Loxjie D10 can do. It sounded great and I personally recommended it to a lot of people, but most of them were put off by its quirky design and color choice. You could only choose between blue and red, and the shape was weird, man, but the sound was really great for the money. Now D30 was released just a few months ago. It's more expensive, but it definitely has a lot to offer. More features, better sound quality, I'll get into that later. For now, let me quickly talk about build, connectivity, features, and then I'll move to sound quality, and after that to some comparisons, as I usually do. Okay, so let's start with connectivity. Here on the back you can see the usual suspects, like almost all of the digital inputs one can possibly need. There's a USB one, coaxial SPDIF, and optical SPDIF. And this little nibble here that you see, it's actually a connection for Bluetooth antenna. It's in the box there. I tried it briefly. I don't like using Bluetooth much, but it works. Everything's fine. And on the left side here, there's a pair of RCA analog outputs. This is a line out. You can use it as fixed level, but you can also use it as a variable output. So if you want, you can use this one as a small preamp. There's also remote control to help you with that. And another interesting thing that you can see here is that this is AC power inlet actually, because this device does not come with any sort of power brick or AC to DC adapter, things like that. You power it just with this sort of cable connected directly to the wall socket. And this also means that the actual power supply, AC to DC conversion, is happening inside of the Loxjie D30 itself, which can be a really good thing if a power supply is good, but it also means you cannot upgrade it with your personal power supply, like linear power supplies and low noise power supplies. Okay, so now I'll quickly power it on so we can continue talking about features. So here on the front panel you see a volume knob that also doubles as a button. It has a click. Then we have headphone output and quite big and easily readable LCD display. And the interesting thing that you can see here, for example, which input is selected, USB, no signal at the moment. But also you can see in the upper left corner that the last volume I used for my headphones was 27, and that's remembered, and separate from line outputs. That's great. And I'll quickly show you with a remote few functions. When you enter into settings, one of the things, for example, is a really neat detail is choosing a color of your UI. And this orange one that you see, I chose that. Blue is the default one. And you can go nuts with it. It's a small detail, but really nice. I really appreciate it. Other than that, okay, like choosing inputs, choosing output, line out, headphone out, and several filters. Now your typical sharp, slow, and so on and so on. Just listen for yourself, decide if you hear any difference and which one do you actually prefer. Pre-mode, this is where you choose would you like it to be variable or fixed. And the last one is actually a dimmer function. You can set it to be always on or auto off. I'm not sure how it actually works, I haven't tested it, but I noticed one neat trick. Oh yeah, here it is. It actually turns off the display automatically when you're not using it. You just need to press anything to wake it up again. Neat function also, on the remote you have a display button that you can do that manually. just turn it off and on at your own will. And that's also a small but really neat trick. Details like this one and choosing your own UI color is something that I really appreciate. It just shows the amount of care put into creating this device. Now that's out of the way, let's talk about the actual sound quality D30 offers. And I first connected it to my room setup, which is integrated amplifier and these speakers using RCA line outputs. And what I immediately noticed is how punchy the sound actually is. It's alive, it's dynamic, and it's punchy. And that's a trait that you don't often hear at this price range, and I was very surprised. But I started listening a little bit more careful, so I'll dissect it a little bit for you. So starting with bassline, I quite enjoyed it because it's weighty, it's punchy, it has decent amount of slam. Tonally, it's on the warmer side. So it's not the most precise and quickest bass that you'd ever hear, but it's not sluggish either. You know, it's not overwhelmingly muddy. It's just nice, weighty, punchy bass with a hint of warmth. And the same goes for upper bass region actually. So it's again very engaging, it has decent punch, it's slightly warm. And when we listen to the mid-range instruments and vocals, you actually notice that, because that upper bass, when it's slightly warmer like it is with D30, it gives some sort of fullness and lushness to the sound. And a lot of people actually prefer that to the sound that's dead neutral and completely tight and precise. But again, I have to say this, it's not overdone here, it's not overcooked. Because mid-range I feel has enough of its own presence, clarity, it digs quite a bit of details, and highs are very well extended. They have a lot of details too, so this DAC sounds lively and sparkly, and also it's able to dig a decent amount of air from the recording because it has that good high frequency extension. Now about the soundstage, it feels wide, it feels open. I feel I can easily detect things going on left and right and in the center, but there's no much depth to talk about here. D30 is more of wide, spacious, but upfront sounding DAC. And that's okay, that's engaging. A lot of people like that type of sound. And lastly, dynamics are really good. I mean really good, probably class leading when it comes to up to $200. Because everything sounds just punchy and engaging and just close to you. I never feel that I have to try hard to catch details or to hear something from the recording. Everything is just opened up and easily accessible, easily noticeable. So when you put all of these together, like slightly warmer bass and mid-bass, but with actually very detailed and rich mid-range and open sparkly highs, and you combine that with upfront sounding character and with a lot of dynamics, a lot of drive, and you get a really engaging sound no matter what type of music you listen through it. And yeah, I don't want to forget headphone output. So when you actually connect a pair of headphones, you'll hear all of the same traits that I just described for the line output. Same type of tonality, same type of upfront engaging sound, and the power of this device is very decent. It's not a powerhouse, but I don't see a power becoming an issue for like most of the headphones out there. It still does not have the absolute control and grunt of the external power amp that has several watts under its hood, but usually no combo device like 2-in-1 DAC/amp has. And that actually leads me to few comparisons that I know a lot of you would be asking in the comments, like compare it to this or that. So I'll quickly go through a few of them. For example, hifi Zen DAC. It's a little bit cheaper, it's a great device, but I feel that D30 digs more details. It's richer sounding in the mid-range. It's more engaging, more punchy sounding, and just overall, I feel it's more accomplished device. It's easily better as a DAC, especially if you use hifi Zen as out of the box without linear power supply. But even with linear power supply, it cannot match D30's skills when it comes to sound quality. And a similar story goes with Fiio K5 Pro. Now that one has a more powerful integrated amplifier. It's unusually powerful, but aside from that, everything else I would give to Loxjie D30. It's more detailed, more dynamic sounding, more engaging. Fiio K5 Pro just sounds even warmer in the bass line, more laid back in the mid-range, more laid back in high frequencies. It's flatter sounding. And that especially goes if we talk about DAC sections. Like if you're using line outputs, D30 is just superior to K5 Pro. Gap decreases when it comes to headphone output, but this one is still leading slightly in my opinion. Now what else? Recently reviewed Khadas Tone 2 Pro. This is actually the first one that is putting a real fight. It's slightly more expensive at $200. And here is the thing. If you just take it as it is and compare these two, it will be a tough fight. Tone 2 Pro sounds a little bit neater and better controlled in bass line. It's just tighter sounding, but it's also not as engaging. It doesn't have the same amount of kick and slam as D30. So in my opinion, it's a draw. It all depends on your own preference. I couldn't say this one is better or this one is better. If you like a little bit more grunt in the bass line and just a little bit more upfront sounding device, Loxjie D30 is probably better. If you like something that's more focused, slightly laid back, but neater sounding, it has tightly controlled bass, then you would probably prefer Tone 2 Pro. Things change when you actually use linear power supply with Tone 2 Pro, because that makes it sounds even more lively. It makes the background darker, and at that moment I actually feel that Tone 2 Pro starts to dig more details and create better soundstage. It's still not wider than D30 can offer you, but it's definitely deeper. It layers everything, it pinpoints everything a little bit better. And again, you still have that really tightly controlled bassline, but D30 still keeps that more slammy presentation. For my personal taste, I would rather choose Tone 2 Pro with linear power supply, but that also increases its price, so it's probably not a fair comparison. Just out of the box, as I mentioned, they're very similar in terms of quality. They just have different approach and different signature. You should watch this review if you haven't done that already and decide which one do you think you would prefer. And lastly, again, not really fair, but just why not, I compared it to Topping E30 and L30. Now, because of L30's power, you notice with more demanding headphones that that combo has more grunt and it has tighter grip over bass notes. They kick a little bit firmer and deeper, but other than that, level of details and just overall sound stage is quite comparable. Okay, I give slight edge to Topping combo, that's for sure, But this being like almost half the price is putting a really decent fight. But the funny thing, interesting thing to mention here is that win of topping combo is deserved only because of L30 headphone amp. Because when I actually compare E30 as a DAC to Loxjie D30, Loxjie is just better sounding. It has more dynamics, it's fuller and lusher in the mid-range, and it's just overall more engaging and livelier. And Topping E30, that is a great DAC on its own, just sounds a little bit flat and lifeless compared to D30. And when you actually connect that headphone amplifier Topping L30 to this Loxjie, you get an even better sound. So I can conclude that D30 is a better DAC than Topping E30, but its headphone output section is not as good as L30 is, and that is why that stack takes slight win over the D30. And to be perfectly honest here, if I needed a device that I could use as a DAC and headphone amp, I would probably not go with Topping stack at this moment. I would choose Loxjie D30, I would use it as it is, and if and when I have a desire for some more grunt and control over my headphones, I would just add Topping L30 later on down the road. Because that way I would buy a better DAC first, and I would reap the benefits by having better line outputs and a very, very decent headphone amp. And anytime later, if I decided that I need more power and that additional grunt of external headphone amp, I would still have this great line output of Loxjie D30. But yeah, that's just my approach and how I would do things if I would buying a DAC and amp right now. Okay, so that would be it for today's review. What I can say in the end is that as D10, Loxjie D10 was, Loxjie D30 is again a very surprising device. And it has so many good things going on for it. It's rich with connectivity, rich with features, it has remote control, LCD display, but the most important thing, sound is great. As a DAC, I haven't heard anything better up to $200. You would have to go like Tone 2 Pro with linear power supply or shit modi multibit to get anything better than this one. But like up to $200, I never heard anything better sounding. Headphone amplifier is also really good, great actually. It doesn't have the grunt and sheer power of external head amps, but that's not to be expected. So at the moment, among all of the devices I've heard up until now, and if you ask me what's the best DAC/headphone amp combo that I can buy up to $200, and I don't want to break your budget with linear power supplies, and I would just say go for Loxjie D30. It's a great value, it's a great sounding device, and it's just voiced that way that I can hardly see anybody not liking its sound, to be perfectly honest. Oh yeah, and lastly, it doesn't look ridiculous anymore, like Loxjie D10 did. So it's really nice looking piece of gear now, you know. And with that, and with my really high recommendations, we finished today's review. Now that would be it. If you liked this review, please click that button, share it with your friends, feel free to leave a comment, and see you next time. Bye.